Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live. Talk radio without the static. Email your questions and comments to lynncullenshow@gmail.com. And now your host, Lynn Cullen.
Oh, I almost started singing. God help you. God help you. I looked and saw it's May 1st. So I was almost going to sing, It's May. It's May. See, I'm not singing it. The lusty month of May. Hello, it's May, and it's like winter. How you doing, May 1, 2023? And it's a Monday, and Mondays are, where things just pile up from the last time I was able to speak to you, which would have been Thursday morning. So you have a lot of days in between, and living in these chaotic times in which we do live, always an awful lot happens. So on Mondays, I'm always like, blah, 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 blah. I don't know where to start. I don't know where to start. Let me tiptoe in. So I'll start with sports. My God, if you're a sports fan right now, and I'm not a huge sports fan, but I'm an appreciator of many sports. And when it comes down to, playoff seasons, wow, that's when I really start paying attention. So not quite a fair weather fan, but a fan who tunes in when things get really interesting. Except for the Pirates. And good God, don't look. I'm telling you, don't look. Because the minute, you start noticing this extraordinary beginning of this season, we'll put the pox on them, But the Pirates are like the hottest team in baseball. I know it's May 1st, but whoa, a truly feel good team. And I don't know, I have here the Pirates. They're playing like they're possessed. They're the quickest, listen to this iteration of your Pittsburgh Pirates, the quickest National League club to hit 20 wins with a doubleheader sweep on Saturday in D.C. And then there's the feel good. I think we talked about it Thursday with this guy, Maggie, who has toiled in the, what do you call that? What do you call it? Double A ball. For how many years? 12, 13 years. And he finally gets called up and he hit his first single. He then, I think, hit a double. He got a Gatorade shower. And it could be he's going to be back in Altoona tomorrow. I don't know, because I don't think there's room for him. But as a reporter for the Washington Post wrote, there's no way to know for sure, but Maggie will go down in history as a big league baseball player with 2 hits, an RBI, and a run scored, and no one can take that away from him. And he did that when he was probably at he was able to get his last at bat, and he was, I don't know, really exciting stuff. And the dugout just went berserk when he made contact with that ball. It's a lot of fun. 13 seasons he's been in the minors. So that's really, that's exciting. But the Pirates are winning, like leading in every category practically. Baseball is a game where the nerds, that are into numbers Like you can go berserk, with baseball. And it turns out that when they went into the game yesterday, which by the way they lost, they entered Sunday's game first in the National League in runs scored, second in the league in earned run average, with a major league leading 39 stolen bases. Major league leading 39 stolen bases. They're the top team in triples, third in walks, and yeah. But we need to keep things in perspective. I think they're like they're missing their biggest player who was supposed to be this O'Neal Cruz, who is amazing, and he was going to be the guy, and then he goes and fractures his ankle. He's out. He's been out. So they don't have him, and they don't have one of these. I don't know what he is. They're hurt, and they're playing like this. But they're heading now to Tampa Bay, I guess, and that's going to be a little scary. So anyway, there's that, and then I don't know, guys. If you're into hockey, I'm not particularly into hockey, especially if the Penguins aren't in. But you have the Bruins, who are like everybody was saying was maybe the greatest team ever or something. They're out. I mean, these have been these huge upsets. The best regular season team in hockey history, Boston Bruins, lost in the first round in the seventh game, right? In their at home in overtime after being up 3-1 in the series. Whoa. Can't imagine how that's getting digested. And then there's Steph Curry, scored 50 points in Game 7 on the road, going for one more title. It's the most points anyone has ever scored in a Game 7, ever. So there's a lot of just woo if you're a sports fan. Other stuff I don't even know about, but I'm just saying. And while we're on sports, I read Dick Groat's obit in the Times, and one thing I didn't know he was just quintessential Pittsburgh. I didn't realize he was from here. He never went more than there's the circumference of his life from birth to death is like pretty much in the East End here. I mean, he was born in Wilkinsburg in 1930. Family moves to pretty much next door to Swissvale. He grows up in Swissvale. And he died last week in Edgewood, guys. And he played in Pittsburgh. And, wow. That's Pittsburgh. Pretty much never leave home, but if you do, because he played for other teams, but if you do, you come back. And I did not know this. I'm sure you did, because I'm not paying enough attention to local news these days. But it was just Tuesday last week that Dick Groat was home in Edgewood, 92. He's at his home in Edgewood, and the doorbell rang. And who the hell is standing there but Steve Blass and a camera crew. Yeah. And they told Groat that he had been elected to the Pirates Hall of Fame and conducted an impromptu interview. 2 days later, he was dead. Yeah. Okay, that's all the sports. That's all the sports news. Now where? God help us, huh? E. Jean Carroll takes a stand again for further cross-examination by Trump's brutal attorney, who I understand has sent a letter to the court, which has now been digested by the judge, asking the judge to declare a mistrial. And this is really bizarre. Trump is asking for a mistrial to be declared, arguing that the judge is clearly prejudiced against him and has said prejudicial things in front of the jury. The thing is, you make this appeal to the judge, and I don't know what the odds are, but my guess is the judge is going to say, what? No. And so the trial will continue. It has appeared that the judge doesn't have a lot of patience with Tacopina and his combative bullying presence in the courtroom. But it would be really bizarre if the judge declared a mistrial because of his own behavior. So my guess is that ain't happening. And the way things are going, and obviously they think so too, the jury, which by the way is 6 men and 3 women on a rape case, I would think that might be a little squirrely. But the way it's going now, it appears that there's no way they're not going to convict, given what's been laid out there. But we'll see. We'll see. Where did I see this? The extraordinary reality of a former president currently under indictment in New York City for all kinds of financial crimes, which, if he's found guilty, could put him in jail. That's 34 felony counts. And then he's facing those criminal charges in Georgia for attempting to tamper with the vote count. And that, too, and then the rape case. And you would think in a normal world, that would spell political doom. I mean, my God, there's stories, I think at least maybe 2 in the news today of 2 different people stepping down, resigning from political positions because of people saying they were bullying and difficult to work with, and that sends some people packing from jobs. Donald Trump tries to subvert the democracy very openly. We've all heard a phone call of him attempting to do it. All I need is 1,000 votes. And, bragged. We have him on tape bragging about sexually assaulting women. And they let you do it, he says, if you're a star. So this guy, the astonishing thing is his poll numbers have risen since his indictment and all of his legal woes. Can you imagine? Now, I saw a quote from a Republican who sums that up. That doesn't say anything about Donald Trump, right? His poll numbers going up. That says something about other people. And this woman is said to be what? The former chair of the New Hampshire Republican Party, Jennifer Horn. And she had this to say, and I'd like to see anyone attempt to argue. To see a former and potential future president, God almighty, confront all of these legal issues at once is bizarre. But what's really disturbing is that he's the front runner for a major political party in this country. And you can't just blame that on him. You have to blame that on the leaders of that party and their primary base. That is correct. You blame that on the cowards and the subverters of democracy that constitute that party's population. Yeah, its base, its leaders, and anyone who would vote for him. It is beyond my understanding and ability to comprehend how anyone could vote for him. Almighty. Speaking of that, I'm going to read you something. This is written by a former Republican, now I think independent. You may disagree with Biden on many issues. You may think he's too old, but that's not the primary issue in this election. The presidency, as Franklin Roosevelt put it, is preeminently a place of moral leadership. One of the hardest soul-wearying parts of living through the Trump presidency was that we had to endure a steady downpour of lies, transgressions, criminality, and demoralizing behavior. We were all eroded by it. It was a reminder that the soul of a person and the soul of a nation are always in flux. Every day, moving in the direction of elevation or in the direction of degradation. Say what you will about Biden, but he has generally put human dignity at the center of his political vision. He treats people with charity and respect. The contest between Biden and Trumpism is less Democrat versus Republican or liberal versus conservative than it is between an essentially moral vision and an amoral or immoral one. A contest between decency and its opposite. Yeah, that's it. So, there are people, millions of people, who will opt to vote for indecency, immorality, intemperancy, the corrosion, the vengefulness. Can you imagine? That, by the way, what I read was David Brooks. I mean, essentially saying that it's a choice between decency and its opposite. Which is, yeah. I mean, you boil it all down, yes. You could make that even stronger, I think. But, yeah. So, I have to tell you, I had this interesting encounter Friday. And I just want to tell you, because it was, came out of nowhere. But I had lunch with a pretty iconic cultural figure, important cultural figure that some of you may not even know, but you would recognize his work. He is I guess he'd call himself a cartoonist. Yes, right, cartoonist. And he turns out to be good friends with a friend and was passing through town, and man, somebody sent me a documentary that was made about him. I have to watch it. I mean, I am not a huge, I'm aware of his work and how it's so iconic. But I'm not necessarily a fan because I just never. And then I saw, I don't know, but now I know the guy, and I'm a fan. And the guy I'm talking about is R. Crumb, C-R-U-M-B, Crumb. If you don't know him, Google him. You'll recognize the whoa. So I thought he'd be really odd. He wasn't. He was just lovely. Just lovely. Has lived in France for 30 years. It was his wife who recently died who said, we got to get out of this fucking place. And he was ambivalent, but she did all the work and packed him up and stuck him in a little place in France where he's been ever since. But he was just, he and my other friend were just, what an odd couple. They were, they rented a car and they were driving around, and where they didn't even have, they have a destination eventually, like in Kentucky, where Crumb's got some relatives he wanted to see. But they're going to just wander around Appalachia, stopping in little places where they think they'll find, they're both like into old stuff, especially old music. So old 78. And before they got to Pittsburgh, they did a stop in Ebensburg where they talked some guy out of some amazing, I guess, rare album. And one of the ways they got it from him was Crumb drew him and gave him the drawing, which would be, worth something. Okay, now give us the album. So anyway, that was something. And the other person that was there, which makes sense, was another cartoonist, Rob Rogers. And Crumb was aware of Rob's work. Rob gave Crumb some of his books. Crumb autographed some of his books that Rob had brought. It was wonderful, fascinating listening to the two of them talk. And about their craft. But anyway, that was, whoa. So now having met the man, I've got to I gotta actually read one of his books. I never have. I'm just aware of, Fritz the Cat. I'm aware of Mr. Natural. I'm aware of, these iconic, Keep On Truckin'. I'm aware of all of that, but never really took in his bigger stuff. Like he showed me this book. He did the Bible, or I think just Genesis. And I think word for word, he illustrated the Bible. That's got to be something great. And he said it was his biggest, that's the book that sold the most. I don't know. So anyway, there was that. So everything else paled. Well, not really. I had some friends over the next day, and God, we had a good time, too good a time. Anytime you're out in your backyard and it's even sort of raining and you're almost howling at the moon, and, you live in the city, so there's neighbors around you, and you're shushing your guests like, hey, shh. That's a good party. The other good party is when, I always say, when you end up in the ER, which has happened a few times. There are some legendary parties here where the whole party just departs for the ER. Not because we all are in need, but because one member is in need. Usually me, because I just have a capacity to injure myself inadvertently. I am an accident waiting to happen, or probably more correctly, I am an accident. Oh, I came across this. This is too funny for words. Let me see. It's a TV listing that somebody, captured and then spread around. It's too wonderful for words. It's a TV listing for The Wizard of Oz. And this was in the Philadelphia Inquirer. And it's The Wizard of Oz. It's going to be on, it says, at 8 o'clock on TCM. This is not current, so don't be thinking it is. But here's what it says. The Wizard of Oz, 8 to 10 TCM. Transported to a surreal landscape, a young girl kills the first person she meets and then teams up with 3 strangers to kill again. That's amazing. That's amazing. Talk about thinking outside the box, bringing a new perspective to a much beloved family classic story of a young girl who ends up in a bizarre place, kills the first person she sees, teams up with 3 strangers to kill again. I love it. Excuse me, swallowing in your ear. I want to share with you an article in the New Yorker, and I don't know how much of it I want to share, but it's about a Pittsburgher who's holed up here, his company in the East End. He's a gazillionaire. Doesn't look like it. Doesn't live like it. He's 44 years old, and his name is, I don't know how he pronounces it, Luis, Luis Banan. And it's a very long article. There's one thing in particular, something he said that blew me away. I'm going to share a few other things from the article, then I'm going to ask you to explain to me this thing that he says in the article. For those of you who don't know, he first, when you go online, you're doing something online and you bump into this thing that says, are you a human or are you a robot? You know, where you have to prove you're human, deciphering some weird, you know, numbers or, you know, picking out, tell me which squares have a, you know, a street light in them. So that kind of thing. Well, he's the one who did that, dreamt that up. It was called CAPTCHA, which is clever, CAPTCHA, capture, but it stands for completely automated public Turing test. Turing, like the famous computer guy. The Turing test being if you could tell whether something was AI or human. And obviously, this is something that's sort of gaining in importance. So he, along with this other guy at CMU, came up with that thing that we now all have to deal with. And they told Yahoo, hey, we got this thing for you, so you'll be able to tell. And they gave it to Yahoo. They gave their invention, that code, to Yahoo for free. You take it, they said. And within 2 weeks, the system was up and running. Within 3 years, a version of it had been implemented by nearly every large company on the internet. He didn't make a lot of money on that. It made him a lot of enemies, because when people would realize he's the one who did, he said, you're the one who invented that? I hate that. But then he got this incredibly restless mind. So he comes up with something else. He's still at CMU. He's in his 30s, late 20s, early 30s. And he in 2009, he comes up with something else, a method of digitizing text. He sold that to Google, and that's what made him a ton of money. He says, well, it was certainly enough that I didn't have to work ever again, and my children wouldn't even ever have to work ever again, and maybe their children wouldn't have to work ever again. But he said, but I get really bored. And so he immediately jumped into, and he came up with Duolingo, which is headquartered in East Liberty and is the most frequently downloaded education app in the world. Now, his story is fascinating. He's born in Guatemala, middle class. His mother was one of the first women, or was one of the first women in Guatemala to earn a medical degree. She now lives here with him. His father, he doesn't know that well. He was a well-known surgeon, and apparently the story is his mother was intent on, if she was going to have a child and she wanted a child, she wanted him to be smart, to be smart. So she found the smartest person. This is what his aunt told him. She went looking. She found the smartest person she knew, who was this orthopedic surgeon who had been his mother's professor in medical school, and she convinced him to have a child. That's him. So she figured, I want that guy's brains. And then she just, man, he's got a hungry head, I'll tell you that. But, and what's wonderful for Guatemala is he says in this article, and Guatemala is one of those places, you know, that is where people can't live, can't get ahead, are desperately trying. His own aunt was kidnapped there for ransom. He says, I now employ people whose job it is to figure out how to fix Guatemala. But it's going to require more people than I have and a ton more money than I have. And someone's got to emerge as a leader, and it ain't going to be me. He says he'll eventually give away 99% of his wealth, most of it, to help. Guatemala. But there's disturbing things in here about his approach to AI, which we're all talking about, because he's now working on something that might put teachers out of business. He's working on something, as obviously Duolingo is all about how do you teach somebody language, and Duolingo makes it into a game. You're like rewarded with, trophies, and they're like a game apparently. And he said, look, some teachers are good, but the vast majority are not all that great. Humans, they're just hard to deal with. You need a lot of human tutors, and they're kind of hard to use, and we can't get them for free. And I just want people to be able to learn for free. And he thinks that computers eventually will make better teachers than people. He says, I want the poor person in Guatemala to be able to learn with very high quality. And the only way I know that is you would have the greatest teacher available to anybody through artificial intelligence. But, believe me, that begs a lot of questions. And he says, I know. I spend a lot of time thinking about it. I'm like, okay, well, a small number of people will be out of a job, but suddenly we can teach everybody better. It's not like I feel great about this, but I think it's better to be able to teach all of humanity cheaply, right? So it's fascinating to see. So these brilliant characters, they're aware, and they're making these literally life-altering, world-altering decisions and choices. And the article ends thusly, I told Van On I was struck by an ironic trajectory in his career. He'd begun his career by figuring out a way to distinguish people from robots, CAPTCHA. Now he was helping humans train robots to be indistinguishable from people. Had it occurred to him that he had, in a way, come full circle? And Van On says, it's crossed my mind. I just don't think that much about it. Oh boy. Okay. But here's the thing he says that I literally stopped in my tracks. It was in the middle of the article. Hiring at they go to the place in East Liberty, and the guy's describing it and the environment there and what's going on. And it says hiring at Duolingo hasn't always been easy. And here's the quote from Van On. There's some tech talent in Pittsburgh, but there's not a lot. What? That's what he said. Weren't you led to believe, like me, that we're the new, what's CMU doing over there? What's all that development with all the robotic stuff all over town? What do you mean? There's some tech talent in Pittsburgh, but there's not a lot. I can't comprehend that. I'm sure CMU wasn't very happy about that. I'm sure Pittsburgh, whatever, the powers that be aren't going to be happy he said that. And it talks about, he says, the article says the company has to attract people from out of town and then persuade them to stay. Because we're what? Like a place nobody wants to be? I really took offense. But I'm shocked. I mean, he wouldn't have said it if he didn't feel it was true. So when I asked a friend what she thought, she said, well, maybe, all that talent at CMU, they want to get out. They don't want to stay in Pittsburgh. They want to, get out. So maybe CMU is putting that talent out there, but they're not staying. Van On stayed. It's weird. All right. So anyway, that's just throwing that out there because it blew my mind. Oh, Ben. Okay. Yeah. Right. Ben says, small correction. Robert Crumb illustrated the complete book of Genesis. That's right. It was just Genesis, but it's so big. That was just Genesis. Not the Bible. Some people criticize the project, but I think it's a very good work. Oh, I'm going to have to. No. Just a little bit I saw as I paged through. What a riot. Because stop and think about it. And fact is, I've never really read Genesis beginning because it's all that begot, begets, begots. What is it? I don't know. But so it's Adam and Eve and the creation of the world and the flood, all that crap. I bet it's wondrous. I forgot what he told me, how many years it took him. I mean, it's years and years and years, you can imagine. Chuck writes, regarding the piece I read you from David Brooke, it is truly a choice between decency and its opposite. But Trump's voters define decency differently than you and I. Well, okay. These voters have been fed a steady diet of propaganda and lies, and many could not recognize truth if it hit them in the face. And then there are those who are one-issue voters, like anti-abortion, and so to them it doesn't matter who the candidate is. As David Brooks says, it is the presidency that is the true issue in the next election. And although I somewhat agree, I would argue that it's actually the Supreme Court that is the real issue at stake. Well, they go together. Because without a Democrat in the presidency, you're never going to fix this reeking pustule that the Supreme Court has become under Republicans. Corrupted beyond. I mean, it's just the most corrupt Supreme Court in our history. And how shocking. It's a Republican majority. Yes, I believe it is. Oh my God. So the latest, mass killing, I don't know, I might not be up to date. This horror of this guy shooting off his, AR-15, whatever those things are. Sorry if I don't have the right numbers. I know people who are, have totally fetishized guns get really pissed when people like me, don't know the exact name of a certain engine of death and destruction. But the guy who was out there shooting off and the neighbors who came and said, look, we have a baby who's trying to sleep. And so he kills him. And I think the thing most appalling, most unsettling about this is how they said that 5 dead, 5 survived. 2 of the survivors were children, thank God. who were protected. God bless these women. By two young women in their 20s, probably their mothers, lying on top of them as they absorbed the bullets. And when the children were found, they were drenched in blood from their mothers who had saved them. But here's the thing, and this guy's still on the loose. Hey, what is it? You hear about the Texas Rangers, and you hear about, Texas. Why, those are people who they don't do a lot of things well, but man, those are tough guys. Those are, the very epitome of masculinity to be like a Texas Ranger, right? Or a Texas cop. Unrestrained. Well, how fascinating. Because they can't find the guy. He was drunk. They know who he is. They can't find him. The FBI gets, nobody can find him. They put out a picture. It turns out it's the wrong picture. The incompetence is mind-blowing. Texas law enforcement, Uvalde. That's all I got to say. But then I read this. It's a quote from the sheriff. Well, not a quote. It says, the sheriff told reporters that it could be considered illegal for someone to be doing what that guy was doing, firing off a weapon at 11 p.m. in his backyard repeatedly in a subdivision where there's a neighbor right next door with children. What the sheriff is telling reporters is, it's not illegal in the great state of Texas. At that point, he had committed no crime. That's amazing. That's amazing. All right. Here's some good news. Conservatives actually blocked the implementation of abortion limits in two red states last week. Nebraska, South Carolina. These are bills that would have, again, pretty much taken abortion out of reach. And in South Carolina, that bill was stopped. Now, listen to this, by 5 women, 3 of them Republican women, and 2 Democrats. So here you have it just tells you everything you need to know. The idea of men doing this to women. But in the Nebraska case, it came down to another, and it was a white, male, old, 80-year-old Republican who said, nah, this goes too far for me. And he bucked the Nebraska law and took on the rage of his party. He's quoted as saying, they were instituting a 6-week, after 6 weeks you couldn't get an abortion. And he said, at the end of the day, I need to look back and be able to say to myself, did you do your best? No group came to me asking me to do this. This is my own belief, my own commitment. Governor went after him. You can imagine the rage he's taking on. But that was like, okay, so I think what you're seeing is that there are Republicans who are aware now of how their cruel abortion stands, now that they've won, now that they've caught the car. It's not going to benefit them because the people are not with them. And what's amazing is, like, just, when the kids are getting killed left and right, what do Republican legislatures do? They loosen any gun control laws on the books. They say the answer is obviously more guns. And then when it comes to abortion, and they're pushed back at the polls for their cruel stance, they double down in a lot of these legislatures. It's very odd. Okay, so speaking of abortion, I have an obit. An unlikely life story here. Leroy Carhart died at the age of 81. Was cancer, liver cancer. This is a Midwestern guy. He was Methodist, soft-spoken, 20-year veteran of the Air Force, and a registered Republican. He married the woman that he fell in love with in grade school. He lived on a large farm in Nebraska. Kansas. I think Kansas. No, Nebraska. For God's sake, Colin, get it right. They're all the same to me. I'm sorry. But, those rectangular states. And then, did I mention he was a doctor too? This is okay. So he's in the military. He considered becoming a minister, extremely soft-spoken guy. He lived on a large farm, and he was a doctor. And he was a doctor who was known to perform abortions. 1991, September. A fire breaks out on his farm. Burns the barn down, killed 17 of his 21 horses, killed his dog, killed his cat. And the next day he received a letter informing him that the fire was not an accident. It was retaliation for his performing abortions. His wife is quoted in the article as saying, he's stubborn, very stubborn. He's quoted as saying, that was when I decided. It's where my tenacity comes from. I decided I wasn't going to just be a provider. I was going to be an activist. So when those anti-abortion people killed his beloved animals, burning his barn down, he doubled down. He compared abortion opponents to the Taliban. He said, what's the difference? They're just religious terrorists. Same thing, just using religion for terrorism. He built a clinic and dedicated it to abortions. Women's health, he said, is my life now. He often spoke about, as a young doctor, seeing the side effects of self-induced abortions. The coat hangers, the knitting needle abortions. Women dying. It was horrible, he said. Worse than watching people die in a war. But you see, it was a war. It was a war on women. And it came to him. He built his clinic. He named it the Abortion and Contraceptive Clinic, which again shows him to be, it wasn't like some euphemistic little name like Women's Health Center. No, he just wanted it out there. This is the Abortion and Contraceptive Clinic. He called himself an abortionist. He said, it's not a bad word. You know who his friend was? Over in the next state. Kansas. Dr. George Tiller, who was gunned down by anti-abortionists, by the religious terrorists. The pro-life people, they gunned him down. Did that stop this guy? Not a bit. Not a bit. So what I want to say about Leroy Carhart, this soft-spoken Methodist, Air Force vet, registered Republican, is that he was a courageous man of principle. He worked right up until last month. He was trying so hard to find doctors to replace himself. And he says, the biggest problem I have is finding somebody that's willing to take the target off my back and put it on theirs. So it requires, he worked under threat of death constantly. It says here Carhart tended to be modest. He thought, especially in philosophical comments about abortion, he thought that a perfect world would have no abortions, and also that he did not live in a perfect world. He argued that neither he nor religious scholars nor scientists knew when life began. There you go. He said, scientists say they know, religious scholars think they know. He said, none of them know. That is totally a judgment call, right? He says the only experts on the question of when life begins are mothers. He had a concrete belief that abortion was inevitable and that abortions done unprofessionally could result in grievous harm and death, and that motivated him. His daughter estimated that he trained 300 to 500 doctors in how to perform abortions. Dr. Leroy Carhart. Okay, guys, I guess that's it. Geez, I just looked at the clock and the hour's up. Surprised me. Okay, I guess that's it for me. Hey, thank you all for your emails about what to do with my hard as rock brown sugar. And on top of it, someone who I've thanked sent me a brown sugar keeper, which it turns out to be, you need a special thing. Well, you don't need it, but it helps. And it has this little clay sort of, it's bizarre. Who knew? Anyway, thank you all for all of that. Bizarre. Who knew? Brown sugar. All right, that's it for me. I guess I'm going to put on my snowsuit and head out. Have a good one.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Thursday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper or its advertisers.